Hello and welcome to your sixth lesson of Chapter 1. And today we're going to look at subtracting integers. Last time we talked about adding integers, well now we're going to do the opposite of it. We have two main objectives with today's lesson. First, you're going to be able to use models to subtract integers. And secondly, you'll be able to use a rule to subtract integers. So again, we're just looking at three different ways really you can subtract these integers. All right, and we're going to jump right into it, it looks like. And the first way we look at is by using models. And that is, again, where we use either plus and minus signs, or we use number lines. That's how we're going to look at it first. And let's see, example 1. We have find -7 minus -5. Now, before we start this, I have just one thing I usually do. Whenever you have a minus sign in the middle like this, and it's just a minus sign, not a negative, I usually think of it as take away. So really, we have -7, and we take away -5. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is write what it says in this blue writing over here. It says draw a model of -7. So again, I have these little red blocks to show -7. If you don't have these blocks or you don't want to write them, just make 7 minus signs. Same idea. -5, -6, -7. So I did the first part of this example. I drew -7. Now it says minus -5, or as I rewrote it, take away -5. Well, if we're taking away 5 negatives, all these are negative. So I could take away, well, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. That leaves me with 2 negatives. My answer here is -2. All right, and this next example is very similar to that. So it says find -10 minus, or take away, -1. So why don't you go ahead and set this one up and then see if you can find the answer. Go ahead and pause me now. All right, hopefully if you set it up, you'd realize that you need first 10 negatives, or 10 minus signs. So -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, -9, -10. There we go. I have 10 negatives. Now I'm going to take away a -1, or take away 1. And that leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 negatives. My answer here is -9. So this is the way to do it with models. Next, we're going to look at a number line. And it works the same way. Find 2 minus 8. Well, your first job here is to draw a number line. If we're going to use a number line, guess what? You need a number line. And I'm going to start it with -7, and I'm just going to keep going. And make it a little bit longer. There we go. Now, just like when we were doing these before in earlier lessons, you first find the number given. So here they give us 2. All right, so I'm plotting a point at 2. Now here I have that minus sign, which means take away. So I have 2, and I'm taking away 8. Well, if I'm taking away, I'm not going to go this way. That's not right, because that would show you're increasing or adding. Instead, you have to go this way towards the negatives. So I have to do 8 hops, because it's -8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I end up at -6. My answer here would be -6. All right, and same idea again. You have find -1 minus 5. So begin by drawing your number line. And again, I just usually start with about -5 and then just go forward, because I know I'm going to be using numbers close to 0. So this works. All right. Now, why don't you go ahead and pause me again and see if you can find out what this answer is. Go ahead and pause me now. All right. Hopefully you were able to find the answer to that. And again, I'm just going to go through the steps. So now we're checking your work. All right. First, I find the number given, which is a -1. And then I have that minus or take away 5. Well, if I'm taking away 5, we're just going to keep going to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh. My number line wasn't quite long enough. Well, what comes after -5? -6. There we go. My answer here is -6. All right. And again, if you have questions with these when you're in class tomorrow, make sure you ask me because it's your work time and we want to make sure you get it right. So those were 2 ways to solve integer problems with models. Now this time we're going to look at the rule. All right, and really the rule for subtracting integers is to subtract the integer, add the opposite. All right, so basically what you end up doing is switching it into an addition problem. So where you end up adding integers at the end. And opposites again, remember that would be like -4, 4, 7, -7, -3, 3, and so on. All those are opposites. So we have this first one here that I already switched over. We start with 4 minus 8. And again, you could solve it how I just showed you before, with a number line or with models. Entirely up to you. However, there's also a rule that works the same way or helps solve the problem. And what you do is you leave the first number alone. So notice, nothing happened to that 4. It was left alone. But then we switch that minus or takeaway sign into a positive because we add the opposite. All right, and then the opposite of 8 is -8. So now we have basically a problem from yesterday. We have 4 plus -8. Now, before we solve this problem, I do want to go over those rules quickly from yesterday. We talked about adding integers. All right, and those are, I think I'm going to write them in blue over here. If they have the same sign, so sign's the same, you add. Add those 2 numbers together and then put that sign back in front. So if it was 2 positive numbers, you'd add them together and your answer would be positive. If they were 2 negative numbers, well, you'd still add them, but then you'd put that negative sign in front. If the signs are different, this is where you subtract. Looking at the absolute value, you just subtract those 2 numbers, and whatever number is bigger or has the greatest absolute value, you put that sign in front. Sign of larger number. So here, we have to take a look. Is a sign the same or different? Well, we have a +4, and then we have a -8. Those are different. So I end up subtracting them. And again, I just forget the signs right now when I subtract. I'm going to subtract 8 minus 4. And I get the answer of 4. But now I take a look. Well, my number 8 was at the top. So that was a larger number. And if you go back to the original, oh, that 8 was a negative. So my answer here would be -4. All right, we have this next one that's very similar to it. And it looks like, again, I set it up for you. We have -7 minus a -2. And again, they have that minus sign in the middle. So if I wanted to use a rule, I would end up adding its opposite, to subtract an integer, add its opposite. So they switch the minus sign to a plus. And -2, well, the opposite of -2 is 2. So now I have it set up. This is a problem I'm going to use now. And I look again at my rules up here. Because it's adding integers, we have that plus sign in the middle. I look if the sign's the same or different. Well, here the signs are different. I have a -7 and a +2. So I need to subtract them. Well, my 2 numbers I'm dealing with are 7 and 2. So I subtract them and find the difference is 5. But then, 7 is a bigger number. It's the largest of all of them. And this 7 was negative. So my answer is a -5. All right, so those are just two problems where we use rules to subtract the integers. And here now we have a word problem of it. An airplane left Houston, Texas, where the temperature was 42 degrees. When the airplane landed in Anchorage, Alaska, the temperature was 50 degrees lower. What was the temperature in Anchorage? Now again, when you come to word problems, this is a prime example of when you'd want to use the rules. Because we're dealing with numbers of 42 and 50. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to draw a number line that had over 50 numbers on it. It would take a lot of work. And really, you want to make the best use of your time. So this is a time I would use the rules. So first, we need to write an expression, or write what we found out. We know there's an airplane in Texas. And in Texas, the temperature was, well, 42 degrees. Which isn't so bad. I mean, it's pretty nice if we get up to 42 degrees in the winter here. Now, when the airplane landed in Anchorage, Alaska, the temperature was 50 degrees lower. All right, so we know we're dealing with 50 degrees, and we know we're going to end up subtracting it because it's saying it's 50 degrees lower, not higher. So you're going to subtract that 50. And now they come to that part. What was the temperature in Anchorage? Well, now we need to find out we need to solve it. And again, I'd use the rule of to subtract an integer, add its opposite. So 42 degrees, again, is left alone. Switch the minus to a plus because we're adding the opposite. And then we look, the opposite of 50, well, that number that's 50 away from 0 in the opposite direction is negative 50 degrees. There we go. Now we have one of the addition with integers here. Now, I would like you to pause it and then solve it. And again, remember to use those rules for adding integers. Same signs versus different. Go ahead and do that now. All right, let's see what we get. Well, again, if you take a look, we have a positive 42 and a negative 50. If there's no sign in front of a number, that means it's automatically positive. The only time it's negative is if it has that negative sign in front. So I'm dealing with 42 and negative 50. They're different signs, so I end up subtracting them. I subtract 50 minus 42, and I get 8 degrees. Now again, I take a look. 50 was on top because it was a bigger number, and 50 was negative. So my answer here is negative 8 degrees. So in Alaska, it was negative 8 degrees on that day. Now, here's a little quick check before you're done. And really, all I want you to do, you don't have to solve it. Oh, never mind, I guess you do. Then solve in there. My bad. What you have to do is rewrite the following expressions using only addition. So basically, you're using that rule. Add the opposite. So first, switch the problems over into addition problems by adding the opposite, and then you solve them. We'll do the first one together. So for example, 6 minus 4, well, I leave 6 alone. Minus signs turns into plus. And I have 4, which the opposite of that is negative 4. So I just rewrote it using addition, and now I solve it. Well, the signs are different, positive 6, negative 4, so I subtract them, and I get 2, and 6 was the bigger number, and in the original, it was positive. So my answer here is positive 2. Go ahead and do the same thing with the next two, and then you can come back and check your answers. Go ahead and do that now. All right, let's check those answers. Again, to rewrite it, I'd leave 14 alone, minus switches into a plus, and then negative 2, well, turns into a positive 2. So I have 14 plus 2. On this one, both signs are the same. They're both positive numbers. When the signs are the same, you add. So 14 plus 2 is 16. And because both numbers were positive, my answer is a positive 16. Now, number 3 here was actually already an addition problem. So you didn't really need to do anything there except solve because it has that addition sign in the middle. So you take a look, both numbers, we have negative 5 plus negative 3. They're both negative. Well, the signs are the same, so then you add them together. 5 plus 3 is 8. Well, If the answer is negative, or both numbers are negative, the answer is just going to get more negative, excuse me. So negative 5 plus negative 3, or you add 3 more negatives, you get negative 8. And that would be your lesson for 1-6. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.